Hi, my name is Susan Hyman. I'm the Division Chief of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics at the Jocolano Children's Hospital. Many of you know me. One of my major hats is clinical assessing and treating children with autism, as well as having a role in autism research. And I'm very happy to be here today. Safety of children with autism has been an important goal of one of my other activities through the American Academy of Pediatrics. So thank you.
And would the deputies like to go ahead and introduce themselves? I think we may have you on mute.
Hello, I'm Deputy Marc Schell. I've been with the Sheriff's Department for about 27 years. I work in the jail bureau. We have multiple bureaus here with the Sheriff's Department. And most of my experience with autism comes through having a daughter of my own that's 6 years old that's diagnosed with autism, nonverbal.
Deputy Brendan Hurley. I have been with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office for a little over 15 years. My primary role is road patrol. I'm what we call community engagement deputy. So I do a lot of these conferences and educational piece for the Sheriff's Office. And like Marc, most of my experience with autism comes from my son, who is 8 years old now.
Sergeant Chris Bussler. I've been with the Sheriff's Office 21 years. I'm currently assigned to our recruitment, background, and training, and then a side responsibility as I oversee the community engagement / community liaisons group. So I'm here just kind of to support the Sheriff's Office autism liaisons and learn a little bit of information for myself.
Okay, I'm Mike Otley. I'm a canine handler. If you haven't seen Pete yet. This is Pete. She's a bloodhound. We use her for mostly missing person type investigations. She's a little naughty, but she does like to be up on top of tables. Obviously, we've been in searches before for autistic kids. So thanks for having us today as well.
Yeah. Deputy Jocolano couldn't make it. It's his birthday and his wife had other plans for him.
Christine, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Sheffer. I'm the superintendent of schools at the Mary Cariola Center. This is a topic that I feel pretty passionately about, both from the point of view of education for independence for children and youth with autism, but also education for prevention of elopement and bolting. And then the other side of it that's super important, it's very sound plans for safety and recovery. So how do you prevent elopement, and what do you do if you find yourself in that situation?
Thank you, everyone. Stop share now so we can see all of our participants. We will get right started with questions. And I'm going to start with Dr. Hyman. Susan, can you define elopement for us and share with us why individuals with autism spectrum disorder or with intellectual disability or developmental disabilities might elope?
So thank you, actually, Melissa, for expanding the question. People with developmental disabilities are at increased risk for wandering off, which is another term that's synonymous with elopement. So other terms that you might read are wandering, elopement, running away, running off. And the reason why these are all important behavioral safety concerns is that they're done at times that other individuals may not appreciate danger. So the wandering off and elopement leads to accidents. And that's really the real reason for concern, because of decreased understanding of danger. The reason why people with autism and other disabilities may wander off or elope has to do, there are actually 4 major reasons. One is perseveration. One of the core differences in autism is this driven, intense interest. And it may be water, which we'll come back to multiple times today. It might be going to the swings down the street. It may be to get the empty soda bottles in the neighbor's garage, but it's a driven interest that will cause someone to run off without concern for fear or safety. The second reason why people will run off or elope has to do with anxiety. If things are too intense, they don't understand what's going on, they will escape from the situation. So that may be a fight or flight response. And we'll talk more about how you deal with fight or flight responses that the sheriffs know intimately. And the third major reason has to do with learned behaviors. So it may be a way to escape demands that if a child or a young adult is given a demand that they don't want to comply with, they may find that running off is really a pretty efficient way to avoid doing it, or that running off may be serving as communication, which is come play with me. And understanding the reasons for elopement really ties into the interventions for teaching people alternative behaviors, prevention, and also what to do when they do elope, run off, or wander.
Fantastic, thank you. Is there anything else anybody else would like to add to that? I'll move on to the next question. This question is for Christine. How can families and educators keep children safe while promoting independence?
I'm sorry, couldn't unmute there. That's such a huge question, but it comes down to, and circling back a bit to what Dr. Hyman said, understanding the typical reason for the behavior of wandering or bolting is really, really key, because that allows you to start building a safety plan that's individualized and takes into account the question of what could happen instead. And oftentimes, you'll see that schools will start with a school-wide safety plan. But for our students, we need to look at, okay, that's great, but what is it that's driving the behavior, and what are the more satisfactory alternatives? So if it's a function of anxiety or that need to flee, where can you go that's safe? Where can you go that's quiet? Where can you go? What are the boundaries? Those are the things that help to build the independence and a task analysis for each and every one of those.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm also see that speaking of elopement, that our friend Peak, I don't know how much time Peak has to spend with us. So I'm wondering if you guys, if we want to introduce him at this point and tell everybody a little bit about Peak while he's, before he tries to escape the conference.
Can you unmute?
Are we unmuted?
We're unmuted.
Was it that obvious?
So, yeah, so Peak is a bloodhound, and she's certified in man trailing is her technical skill. So what she does is she's a scent specific dog, where we get a scent article from a missing person or whomever she's looking for, which is like your traditional, the kid runs away, leaves behind his baseball hat That's what I would use like as a scent article. She's able to take that scent article. It smells different. Every person smells different to her, and establish a trail, and then take us to that person that we're actually looking for. Basically what she's doing is she's smelling dead skin cells that fall off of your body. And then as they slowly decompose, there's bacteria that naturally occurs on your skin that creates the odor that she's actually smelling. We've been out multiple times for missing people, including autistic kids. We've had success. Most recently, I would want to say is a couple months ago when we were up in Clarkson on a case where a child ran away from home. Peak is obviously some of the theory behind her looking for people as opposed to your traditional police canine with the big pointy ears, the German Shepherd, is that she's a little more docile. You know, typically I don't think anybody, although I can't speak for everybody, but less people are afraid of her. So if we're looking for somebody and we want her to obviously be successful, we also don't want to scare people farther away from us that we're looking for. So having a non-aggressive looking dog hopefully assists with that. Obviously, some people still are afraid of dogs, so it doesn't work every time though. So I don't know if I've answered questions based on that, or if I need to say anything else.
Any other questions, Valerie, coming in regarding Peak?
Not yet. Thanks.
Okay. Great. She is. Yes.
I'm sorry. Could I add one comment? One of the things that we are starting to recommend, and this idea actually came from a mom, that if their family was going on a big outing, doing something that was out of the ordinary, one of the ways they prepared just in case there was a wandering off was she actually had a bag of stuff that she brought with her. And it's one of the things we recommend, having a satchel of recovery tools. But she would just grab the young man's pillowcase and stick it in a plastic bag and bring it with her, because she was afraid that, you know, with their more and more scent detection dogs, that he was going to not leave a baseball cap behind. You know, they were going to be at a park somewhere with nothing of his. And I always thought that was a great idea. It doesn't take up very much room. You put it in a plastic bag, you take it with you, and hopefully you never ever need it, and it goes back on the bed when you get home at night. It's something that parents, family members can do to be more prepared for, you know, what we don't want to think about.
If I can ask the sheriffs, is a pillowcase the proper item? What other items of clothing or personal items would you recommend to families?
There really isn't a preferred item, other than what we want is something that's not contaminated with the sense of other people. So like in the case I had this morning where a dementia type patient walked away from home, we had to differentiate. In this case, she slept with her husband. Well, we don't want to mix pillowcases up, because let's face it, people roll around in the bed and intermingle their scents. The same goes with like shoes, because of odor eaters and so on that might get deposited into your shoes. You don't want that. But instead, honestly, a lot of times what I'm looking for when I go to a house with a missing person is I usually go in and I'm looking for dirty laundry, and honestly, it's underwear that's worn close to the body. It gets a lot of contact with skin. That's where a lot of sweat collects, and that is that's what I normally use, is try to get underwear, like an undershirt type thing.
Great, thank you guys. She is beautiful.
Yes.
She is not a threatening looking dog at all. She looks very sweet. I will move on here to the next questions our participants gave us. So this question goes to everybody. What safety, and again, this is a bit of a broad question, but what safety skills should we be teaching families and children that you guys would say is your top priority safety skills?
I think for myself, everyone's going to be a little bit different, obviously, depending on age, depending on triggers, depending on that. But for me, with my daughter, it's locks on doors, locks that she can't reach. It's teaching her the word stop, using stop a lot and reinforcing it when she does stop. It's alarms on doors. It's always having an eye on her. It's the fence I have around my backyard. I think you know your child the best, or whoever you're in charge of their care. If you're an educator, you know that person the best. And sometimes it's going to be different for each kid a little bit.
So I'll jump in and then I'll defer to our educator. Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head, that it's a hierarchy of interventions. You know, the first set of interventions are, what can you teach your child? Can you teach them a stop sign? Can you teach them to inhibit? Can you teach communication skills that they can ask or tell rather than elope? So there's the learning that the child can do. There's the modification of adult behaviors. There's the modification of the environment. There's using equipment to alert around elopement. And then in addition to peak, there are the equipment things that you can do to find a child or an individual once they do run off. So it is this hierarchy that each family needs to think, and each school needs to think of. Christine?
I'll start with one of the things that I personally think is really important and doesn't typically happen in school, but that's water safety, swimming. Wandering off has risk about it, and water is one of those risks. Anything that we can do that would minimize a drowning, near drowning, water-based incident is something that families should be considering. So that's a little bit outside of the school, but it is something folks should think about in advance. In terms of things that you may work on in school, through an IEP, through daily routines, things like asking for a break. How does this individual ask for a break? And how do people know what that means? Like, it's too loud here. It's too busy here. It smells funny here. I don't want to be here anymore. I need a break from being here. Or asking for a safe spot. I need to go to a different space. Because if you can build proficiency around those two areas, you're touching on some of the reasons that folks with autism wander off, such as escaping demands, and because this environment makes them feel too anxious.
Fantastic. Thank you. This question is also for you, Christine. What environmental modifications or behavioral interventions can families and educators implement to help prevent wandering?
So I think the folks from the Sheriff's Department mentioned a few in terms of kind of those the environmental modifications that are really barriers. Locks on windows, locks on doors, the alarm systems, and there's the place for those. But also the behavioral interventions of, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but instead of bolting, what can happen? I can ask for a break. I can go to this space. And then you don't just teach that in a classroom or in school or at home. You have to teach it in the community. You have to teach it places where students go. So if it's a family that typically goes to Wegmans together, or they go to the mall together, teaching it at school isn't going to be good enough for it to work under stress or in a moment of anxiety at the mall. So how can you go to the mall and teach, okay, if you need a break, you're going to show me this picture cue, you're going to give me this statement, whatever it is that is the requesting method for that child, you have to practice it before their stress. You practice it, early on Sunday when the mall is just open for walkers is a good idea. You don't practice it the day you're going to see Santa in mid-December with a crowd. And that's really no different than any of us. We can do things, if you play tennis, you can play tennis so much better in your backyard than you can the first time people are watching or the first time it's a community event. You cannot make that big jump from, oh, he learned that in school, so now he can do it in the crowded mall.
Perfect. Can you give us some examples of, like at Mary Cariola, some of the classroom modifications that you might utilize?
So modifications, we don't use a lot of locks and things. Modifications such as a stop sign that is on the floor with clear contact paper over it. A red line, the red line, here's the safety line. Things such as, here is your area where you stay. Your area is blue. There are a number of door interrupters that can be used, but they get a little tricky, particularly in the school setting, because you also have to be mindful of fire and safety emergencies and those kind of codes. So you're much, it's a much stronger environmental modification is to use the markers, use a stop sign, use something that student has been taught to identify with no further, here's where we stop. And also to make it portable. The reason I like a piece of red tape is you can take a roll of it anywhere. You can put it, on the floor in a hotel room, as an example. You can, when you go to grandma's, you can put it in the door there, where it isn't so easy to, take a special lock that you've installed in your home with you when you go. Even though we know the lock is probably close to 100% effective for preventing the elopement, it doesn't help build the independence.
Fantastic, thank you. We had a few questions from families about how families can collaborate with the schools to create a safety plan. What would your recommendations be?
I know you're looking at me. I'm trying to get my thoughts, because what I'm not trying to just be off the cuff.
If I can, if I could just jump in, that I think where it starts is letting the school know that your child has, that your student has elopement issues, because getting it on the IEP, bringing it up, makes it part of the documentation. And I think that having it on the IEP alerts the school team, no matter what kind of school you're in, that safety is a priority, and safety on the bus, safety in the parking lot, safety in the classroom can all be addressed.
Yeah, and you know, what I was going to say was just make sure it happens. Don't take, we'll get to it, we'll wait till parent conferences, we will, you know, we have a school safety plan. It really sometimes falls to the parents to make sure it happens, and getting it on the IEP is key. And that includes goals. You know, a goal example could be, you know, given an unpreferred task, something that, you know, might push the elopement envelope, giving an unpreferred task paired with a student reinforcement system, the student will choose to go to a beanbag instead of leaving the room. I just made that up, and it's, you know, probably missing the with 70% accuracy, but the IEP is a multifaceted document, should have your safety concerns in more than one place. So the first place is in the goals. A second place is often under supports to school personnel. What happens if there's an elopement? How do I prevent an elopement? What do the staff need to know? What specialized training do folks need to have?
Okay, Valerie, did you have a couple questions you wanted to ask?
Sure, thanks, Melissa. Thank you everybody for submitting your wonderful questions. We have a few coming in. The first one is from a few parents on the call who in this case have sons with autism who are teenagers. And they're wondering that if their child is wandering and does not respond positively to first responders, especially if they're not familiar with that person, their child may be misinterpreted for being non-compliant or aggressive. So their question is, how might a first responder respond to that individual?
That was us.
I think it starts with, for us, the golden rule, right? The same as we should treat everybody. We should approach them with patience and understanding. Part of our role as autism liaisons is we're not just here to talk with you. We're here to talk with our own department, educate our people on how to interact with people on the spectrum. Again, the extra patience, knowing some of the signs, flapping hands, whatnot, just recognizers of, okay, this person may not just be having issues, or they're on the spectrum, and know that these aren't aggressive motions. These are just normal motions for them, and understanding, recognizing what they have there and how to deal with that. You know, when you're talking to them and asking them questions, if they're repeating them back, you know, all the echolalia and all the signs of those kind of things, that they're not just mocking you. This is part of the spectrum. So we're trying to teach our people more and more about that. It's a slow process, but we're working on it. So I think the simple answer to the question is just more education for our first responders.
That, and I believe too, depending on the scenario, sometimes we have to react quicker than the time and space that we might want to have. You know, I can sit there and watch somebody for 5 minutes, I might see signs. I might see signs of autism, or somebody that has dementia, or somebody that needs help. But if the call that we're going to requires a quicker response, a quicker action, sometimes we don't have that time to do it, where maybe I would recognize something faster, but somebody with 2 years on the job that hasn't had as much training as I have, they might not see that. So time and space is a huge thing for us. You know, the more time we have to look at the situation, the more space we can give someone, approach them slower. That all helps out.
If I can ask the deputies, and this I think would be an important intervention for the parents and teachers who are on, what information do you want quickly when you get the call, my child has disappeared? What would help you to know in a nutshell that parents or teachers could tell you?
So for us, it's with any missing person, obviously the first thing that we want to know is when were they last seen, where may they be headed, where do they like to frequent, what do they look like, as much of a description as we can get, the most recent clothing that they were wearing. For this situation, if they're, you know, if they're on the spectrum, or any kind of medical history that we need to know about is big. You know, and we know the layout pretty much of wherever we are, so we don't need that. But just, and for someone on the spectrum, like Marc had said earlier too, like what are their triggers? Loud noises, the sirens, the lights, the radio, any of that stuff that we can relay to our people, so that if we're trying to find somebody, or if Peak is trying to find somebody and the dog's barking or the radios are loud, we're just pushing that person further away. We don't want that. So any of that pertinent information that we can get right away is the best.
Yeah, and it looks like we have a question about ways that, and any of you can answer this, that parents can be proactive in having information for, you know, any first responders, you guys, EMT, you know, if they're in Wegmans and, you know, there's an incident, how can they proactively handle the public as far as helping them understand their child?
Yeah. I mean, for us at least, again, it goes back to what we just said. You know, like we have the yellow dot program for anybody with any kind of medical or any issue. The yellow dot program is typically for your car, and it's a small little circle sticker that goes on your window that notifies us that there's a pamphlet in your glove box in case something happens to you. You're in a car crash and you're unconscious. We can go pull out that pamphlet and it gives us a list of your medical history, so we know what we're dealing with. The other way that that's utilized is it's put on the front door of your house. Again, the small little dot, and that tells us that where the pamphlet is in your house, so we can go find that pamphlet and it has all of your updated information. The same as I would tell somebody who has a very long medical history or a lot of prescriptions. I know the ambulance always asks when they get on scene for a list of prescriptions and all of that. If it's easier for you to carry around medical history, information, likes, triggers, whatnot for your child, carry that with you. God forbid something does happen, you have it and you don't have to think of that while you're in a stressful situation. And then obviously, an easy one, again, is having a picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words, so that for us, we know who we're looking for, you know, what they look like, what they're most recently. A lot of times we get pictures of people, but they're several years old, you know, and that 8-year-old is now 13 and twice as tall and 3 times as heavy with a beard and a half. So just, I think those are very big ones for us and for the medical personnel, fire department, all of that.
Does the fire department have a similar program to identify the bedrooms of people who may not be able to follow, you know, escape?
So I have seen stickers. I don't know if it's exactly through the fire department or another organization, but you know, there's stickers that say there's children, and you can put them in the bedroom, or there's signs that you can have that say caution, child may not may not respond to verbal commands and the such like that. I'm trying to remember who those are through. I can't remember if it's the Red Box or there's an organization that has a couple of those. I know they're online. You can find stickers like that. My son for a while had a keychain that my wife put on his sneakers that said, you know, child with autism may not respond to verbal commands, so that people were aware if he did try to run away, why not? They saw that and they, you know, could figure out what was going on quicker.
And if I could just build on that, I think that things like medical alert bracelets, and they have these temporary tattoos. I am not suggesting you tattoo your child, but temporary tattoos that if you have the delusion that Disney World is going to be fun before COVID is over, that you know, you can identify your child. You can get temporary tattoos with your cell phone number on it. And you can teach your child to wear a medical alert bracelet. But kids with pica, who put things in their mouths, which is another dangerous behavior, that may not be safe. If I could, I don't want to run out of time before we have a chance to talk about Project Lifesaver and some of the other things that the Sheriff's Office helps us with. One of the questions was a parent who wanted to bring other families into the fold.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys tell us a little bit about Project Lifesaver.
So, I mean, this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about too. There's multiple GPS tracking and different programs out there. We, as the Sheriff's Office, participate in Project Lifesaver. We don't make any money, or we're not salesmen. I always like to just throw that out there because I don't want people to think we're pushing it, but we have deputies that are trained on Project Lifesaver. And basically what Project Lifesaver is, it's a small bracelet, kind of looks like a watch with like a medical hospital bracelet that attaches it. And in there is a radio frequency emitter. So if your child, adult, whomever is wearing it and they elope, you call us, we have all their information, we have their most updated information with us, and we have its basically looks like an old TV antenna that we plug in their radio frequency in, and it helps us track them down faster.
Fantastic, thank you. And how can families access Project Lifesaver?
So if you go to the Sheriff's Office website, monroecountysheriff.gov, there is and you type in the search bar Project Lifesaver, and the little like search, not the web browser one, but the little search one on the website, type in Project Lifesaver and it'll bring you up all the information that you need for that. It does cost money, but I do know that you can get help from, if they will, OPWDD and some of the other providers can help work with you on that. And a lot of times they cover everything, including the batteries and the bracelets and all of that goes with it.
The one-time startup fee is approximately $350 to start it. Then after that, you're just talking new bands and batteries every so often. So the initial startup, hopefully OPWDD covers that for you, and the costs that are going to come in the future, but it's a one-time fee for the most part, and then it's just battery replacement, band replacement as needed.
And OPWDD family reimbursement funds will cover other safety devices, like perimeter alarms or safety mats or things for safety. And I really want to emphasize how important it is if your child is eligible for OPW to sign up for that, so that you can access Project Lifesaver with those funds.
Absolutely. I use GeoBit for my daughter anytime she leaves the house. When she goes to school, it's a tracking device that she wears on her clothing. She's good enough that she, at this age, doesn't take it off. She's just used to it now. And And I can create safe zones. I know when she's home, I know when she's at grandma's house, I know when she's at school. If she leaves that zone, I'm getting an alert right to my cell phone saying she's left the school. If it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I know she's on her way home. If it's in the middle of the day, I might be texting or calling her one-on-one aide and saying, hey, Adeline left the school. And she may say, yeah, we went over to the football field and they're all playing over there. Okay, thank you. But so it's nice to have that peace of mind a little bit.
Yeah, there are a bunch of different devices. And so I was going to say, we were not going to ask you guys to speak to all of them, but certainly we can make available on our website the various GPS devices that are out there. They all have their pros and cons, so we didn't want to get into specific brands. But as far as some of the ones you can purchase through manufacturers. Would you guys also be able to tell us a little bit about your SPIN program?
Yeah, so SPIN program is Special Persons in Need, and that runs through the Monroe County 911 Center. So basically, like we were just talking about with what do parents need to provide to first responders, you can provide all that information ahead of time. That way we have all of that, and it can cut down on how long it takes us to find somebody, because we don't have to re-go over all of that information. Bear with me for a second, because they just actually gave me some of the information today. So I know it goes, you can get the information through Autism Speaks, Trinity Assistant Corporation, Lifespan, CDS, like Arc of Monroe, Mary Cariola allegedly is part of it as well. Yep. Yep. Oh, sorry. I talk fast. So basically you register through them, you give them all of the information, and then they forward it to the 911 center. It's all voluntary. It is not it's not to keep track of your kids for any other purpose than just information that you think that we should have and have available if something does happen, especially elopement and that kind of issues. With that, I would also recommend that if you're concerned about elopement, it might be good to just go to your local police department and talk with somebody, like Marc or myself, that can take some of that information. We have actually put pictures and information of children who elope on our billboard inside the zone, so that our folks know who this person is, because we did have an incident about a year ago where a child eloped. We found the child before mom knew. It wasn't her fault. She has all the alarms and all of that, and he outsmarted them. But we found him walking around in his underwear. And it was good for us because our deputies had those pictures, had that information. We knew who he was, and we could get him home safely. So I always recommend that, interacting, let the police officers know who the child is, meet the police officers or the fire department, whoever, make that personal connection. That's always a good thing. But the SPIN program also is out there, and it's optional.
And just for parents, for information, so they can register their, for lack of a better word, they can put their information for their child into this SPIN program, which is through you guys, correct, in the county. Should they also collaborate with their local law enforcement, or do you guys collaborate directly with the local law enforcement specific to the, each township?
So we interact with all the local law enforcement, but the 911 center is they directly work with everybody. So that's why they collect all the information, because they're the ones who are dispatching the calls for service. So whether it's the town of Greece, who has their own police department, town of Ogden, village of Fairport, all of that, it is the 911 center that is giving them all of that information.
So if you live in the village of Fairport, you probably want to go meet the village of Fairport police, let them know who you are. This is my child. It doesn't make much sense to go out to Greece if you're living in Fairport and meeting all those. So yes, meet up with your local police department, but you can always meet with the sheriffs too. You know, we have A zone for the east side, B zone for Henrietta in the south, and C zone for out on the west side.
Anything else that any of our speakers would like to add to resources and interventions for elopement prevention within the community?
Melissa? There's just been such very good information shared. I would just remind parents that you need to have a gotta go kit, because having, you know, a picture at home, having a pamphlet at home, but you really need to be prepared with a kit that you have that wherever you go, because, you know, elopement may happen at home, but it may happen anyplace else. And as more and more pictures are on people's cell phones, and less, you know, are the pictures in your wallet that I might remember when my kids were younger, it's very hard to share a picture that's on a cell phone, and then you end up having to text it to this person and text it to that person. Having some paper pictures of your child in your mobile kit is a really good thing, because they can be given out quickly, and time is really of the essence, particularly if you're in an unfamiliar environment.
Susan, I wanted to add something.
Yes, I want to make, and I promised the other members of the panel that I wouldn't bore the audience with lots of statistics. So I just have two statistics for you. One is that almost half of individuals with autism will wander at some point to the point that their parents are concerned. And the other is the #1 cause of death among people with autism is drowning. And I just got shivers, because I can think of a number of patients over the years that when you pick up that 911 call and say, my child is in the pool, the river, the canal, Lake Ontario, and the sheriffs respond, that finding them with the GPS is too late. That what you really need to do is attend to this chain of prevention. Swimming lessons are good. There are a number of local organizations which will help with swimming lessons, but if any of you have done junior life saving when you were teenagers, you know that swimming in your clothes with your winter boots on is not the only answer. The answer is prevention. And it's, you know, having a handoff so that when you're at a pool or you're at a body of water, that there's always someone assigned to watching your child, whether or not they know how to swim. That you have all of those safety measures in place that everyone has talked about to attend to children, to provide sensory breaks, but to really use teaching and prevention to not have to make that 911 call, and to be aware that it takes a village, that your neighbors with pools, your neighbors with ponds need to be aware that you have a child or you have an adult that might wander. And it's really alerting your neighborhood and allowing your neighbors to help you protect your child with pool alarms, with fences. And, you know, I'm getting on my soapbox about drowning because this is one of our most fearsome occasions when there is wandering. So I will stop there. And I want to thank both Christine and the sheriffs for their role in helping our children be safe.
Thank you, Susan. That is it's a huge, huge safety concern for our kiddos. So thank you for sharing that. You guys have, any of you have any thoughts on things such as ID cards or accessibility stickers for parking or other things that can help prevent kiddos from eloping in the community?
So I'll make an advertisement for the Big Red Safety Box as well as the Autism Speaks materials. If your child runs off in the parking lot, you can get a handicapped sticker so you can park closer. And we certainly sign off on a lot of those. Your pediatrician can sign off. You get the form from your, I think, your local town hall. But it's part of that prevention.
Thank you.
Yes, and it's very simple to do. Like you said, your physician can sign off on it very simply. It's a very short form to fill out, and you're correct. Just take it right to your town hall. I think their handicap passes are good for 4 years, maybe it was 5 years. And then you just reapply again and get another one. But very simple, and it is very convenient to be able to park close, especially in a parking lot when you're probably shopping. So you got hands full of something, and then you're trying to hold on to a hand of a little one, and they bolt in a parking lot is never a good thing. So yeah, the handicap passes really are helpful to be that much closer to the door and where you got to go.
And ID cards, I think, are always a good idea, real quick, just because I know a lot of parents have mentioned to us the concern of if my child gets pulled over, how do they tell the police officer that they have autism or anything else? And it's just a simple way. It's just, we're going to ask for your ID anyway. So if you hand us both cards, it tells us right away, okay, again, you may have that, echolalia or something like that. We understand what we're dealing with at that point.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I love the card things for going into lots of different places to give people in a situation you're under stress, right? To be able to hand that off to someone.
Alyssa, you also mentioned ID cards, I think, in that previous question. And one of the things that may be useful, there are IDs from the companies called Road ID, used by people who bicycle and run. They come in a couple different varieties. They come in a bracelet. They come in a shoe tag, which I know was mentioned earlier, but they're reasonably priced, and they have enough lines of text that you can put more information on them than you can on some other, then you can put it in perhaps in other ID type bracelets. So if you are concerned about somebody being able to identify your child, an ID card may be in their pocket, may not be in their pocket, but the Road ID is another choice that folks can look at.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you. And that one you don't have to, anybody can buy.
That's correct.
That's fantastic. Thank you. For just interest of time, I don't know, we said we would go to 3 o'clock, but it looks like we still have quite a few questions. We have a number of questions left from the incoming and from the people who are on. I don't know if we want to take a minute and see what some of the incoming questions are, Val, if there's some things that you wanted to add.
Thank you. A few questions related, and it was a perfect segue into this because we're talking about transportation, but would anybody on the panel have suggestions for specific interventions when an individual is in a car or on a bus and attempting to elope?
So I actually, if I could jump in, I had the occasion to be in an absolutely wonderful CSE meeting the other day. I won't name the district, where they very creatively came up with a number of suggestions for bus safety. And, you know, the paying attention to the reasons why, doing the FBA, the functional behavior assessment analysis, to see why the elopement is happening. So things like providing a communication system on the bus, teaching and reinforcing seatbelt use, especially if a youngster or an individual wears a seatbelt in the car, having a bus aid or a visual of knowing what the steps are before you get to school. And what I thought, one of the things that was so clever is you can't predict traffic, so you can't time down, but what you can count down are the stops and who gets on or gets off at each stop, so you can have a visual. Because for a lot of people with autism, it's all about predictability. It's knowing what's going to happen next when you don't have that social reference. And I really want to speak to the power of behavioral strategies. And really, you know, we don't have as much control over public buses, but school buses, you can have this as part of the IEP, can't you, Christine?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You can use all those techniques in the car. The parent who was at the CSE actually had used a number of those in addition to a social story. And I was just so impressed at how the school and the parent were able to really problem solve because they knew this young person.
Yes, and Susan, can you speak? Are there harnesses for younger children that say might unbuckle themselves as parents are driving down the road?
Oh, this was just a question on one of my listservs. There are a number of products that can be used to prevent someone from unbuckling a seatbelt that are short of a harness. And we certainly, a number of these products are listed on the Autism Speaks problem solving page and in the big red safety box. You know, escalating to the point of a harness, which is more restrictive, you really need to go through all the other, you know, hierarchical interventions first.
Great, thank you. And the big red box can be found on our website, correct? On the Developmental and Behavioral Pediatric website, I believe. Let's see. Oh, there were a couple questions on, again, this is for Susan or for anyone else who wants to answer, why it is so important to, you know, differentiate between the triggers, you know, the various triggers when we're targeting interventions for elopement, why that is so important to understand why a child is eloping in order to intervene. So for families that are either, you know, reaching out to the school or to medical providers or in the community. Susan, I can start with you.
Well, because the treatment matches the reason why you need treatment. If someone is eloping because they have really bad impulsivity, then the treatment may be treating the impulsivity medically. That's usually not the right answer. If someone is eloping because they're driven to pursue a perseverative interest, the treatment may be one of teaching inhibition, but also providing that individuals with an alternative way of fulfilling their need for stimulation. So understanding what is escape driven, what's because of perseveration, what's because of impulsivity, what's because of fearlessness, not understanding, really will guide your intervention.
Thank you.
I think it helps too to figure out, are they running away from something you know, an activity that they don't like, or are they running to something that they want? You know, they want to go over to the basketball courts because they like watching the ball bounce, so they're going to run over there when they're at the park. Or are they at home and you're trying to make them sit and do some work, or at school, you know, it's time to do some work, and now it's going to trigger them. It's a non-preferred activity, so it's the flee. And then that helps work on figuring out what the trigger is and how we're going to, you know, fix that.
And we'll finish with one last question. If you all would like to speak to how families and the community can improve safety awareness.
I'll start, I guess. I think how the sheriff's department can help is the reason why our department was formed here, the community liaisons, is that we are out in the community talking with providers, talking with Autism Speaks, you know, all these different agencies. So we're learning on top of learning from our own children and being fathers. We're learning more and more, and we're bringing that back to our department, which is making all of our deputies, all of our supervisors more knowledgeable, know how to deal with all different types of people, and realize that sometimes you got to take your time, look at the situation, look at the person, take a deep breath, and then react to what needs to be done. And so I think how we're trying to help the community, the two of us, is basically in training, and then also going out into the community and just talking to people.
Christine, your thoughts?
I think that the talking, being out there before they're aware, before there's an issue, is really, really key, along with knowing your neighbors, sharing with your neighbors. I mean, if your child elopes from home, your neighbors need to be on your team. So sometimes we get too busy. We don't stop and, you know, take a plate of cookies over and introduce ourselves, or, you know, stop and talk to a neighbor that might be sitting on their porch. But having the folks who live nearest to you know your child, know what's expected, is really just increases your safety team. It increases the number of people that have engagement and a relationship with you and your child. And in those moments of elopement, time matters, and having people available matter. I know at Cariola we've done lots of training for, like, we've done Rochester City Police Department training where we've gone to every shift change. So we had somebody at midnight, or, you know, I don't know, 7 a.m. doing some training, and that's part of it. But having good people close to where you live is really important.
And what I would add, I think that educating the first responders, educating the schools, and having families aware is critically important. So what my job is to make certain that your primary care providers, the physicians and nurse practitioners that care for your children and adults, don't stop their anticipatory guidance and asking you about safety when your child graduates from a booster seat. That this is something that's a lifelong concern, so that all of your attending today is actually part of creating this community that Christine is talking about, that we need to be upfront in all of our communities, whether it's the police and first responders, teachers, the grocery store staff and your neighbors, but especially your family members.
Thank you all. This is great to have all you guys representing, to have a medical representative, a school representative, and the county sheriffs with us today. I love this collaboration. This was fantastic. We really appreciate you guys all joining us today. Valerie, was there anything else before we end that, as far as, did we answer most of the questions?
Yes, thank you. And there's definitely interest in continuing the conversation. So thank you everybody for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.